The massive space station hung in the void like a giant metal city. Nexus Prime was home to the Galactic Council, where dozens of alien species met to discuss the problems facing their galaxy. Today, the main hall buzzed with worry and fear. Representatives from all corners of known space had gathered for an emergency meeting. Commander Jake Morrison sat at the human delegation table, his weathered face showing no emotion as he listened to the alien voices around him. At 45 years old, Jake had seen more battles than most humans would in 3 lifetimes. His gray eyes scanned the room, taking note of each species present. The crystalline Althurians sparkled like living diamonds. The insect-like Thraxians clicked their mandibles nervously. The gaseous Nebulans floated in their containment suits, their forms shifting like colored smoke. But today all of them looked afraid. The Zephyrian Empire has struck again, announced Council Speaker Veltar, a tall being with blue skin and 4 arms. 3 more systems have fallen in the past month. Their fleet moves like a plague across the galaxy and nothing seems able to stop them. Jake leaned back in his chair. He had heard about the Zephyrians before. They were an ancient race of warriors who had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of war. Their technology was beyond anything most species had ever seen. Energy weapons that could melt planets, shields that had never been broken, ships that move faster than anything in the galaxy. "How many ships do they have now?" asked Ambassador Crix of the Voltarian Republic. Her snake-like body coiled nervously around her chair. "Our intelligence reports suggest over 200 capital ships," replied Veltar. "Each one is equipped with plasma shields that can deflect any known weapon. Their energy barriers are so strong that even our most powerful lasers bounce off them like light hitting a mirror." Murmurs of fear rippled through the hall. Jake noticed how the other species looked at each other with growing panic. They had built their entire military doctrine around energy weapons. Lasers, plasma cannons, photon torpedoes. All of them useless against Zephyrian shields. Lieutenant Amy Peterson, Jake's tactical advisor, leaned over to whisper in his ear. "Sir, the preliminary reports from the Kepler system are coming in. The Zephyrians wiped out the entire defense fleet in under 2 hours. Not a single enemy ship was damaged." Jake nodded grimly. Amy was young, only 28, but she had one of the sharpest military minds he had ever encountered. Her short brown hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her green eyes showed the same concern that filled the room. Admiral Kethver of the Althurian fleet stood up, his crystalline form catching the light and throwing rainbows across the walls. "We must face the truth," he said, his voice ringing like wind chimes. "The Zephyrians are technologically superior to any single species in this council. If we are to have any hope of stopping them, we must combine our forces." Agreement echoed through the hall. Species that had been enemies for centuries were now talking about joining forces. The threat was that serious. "What about the humans?" asked a voice from the back. It was Ambassador Thekmer of the Draknari Confederation. "Are they willing to contribute ships to our defense fleet?" All eyes turned to Jake. He could feel the weight of their stares. Some looked hopeful, others looked doubtful. Many looked dismissive. Jake stood up slowly. "The human government is prepared to commit 12 ships to the defense effort." Laughter erupted from several sections of the hall. Not friendly laughter, but the kind that came from disbelief and scorn. 12 ships? Admiral Kethver's voice carried clear contempt. "Commander Morrison, with respect, the Althurian fleet alone is contributing over 300 vessels. What can 12 human ships possibly accomplish against the Zephyrian armada?" "Our ships are well equipped and our crews are experienced," Jake replied calmly. "Equipped with what?" Kethver pressed. "From what our intelligence tells us, human vessels still use projectile weapons. Bullets, Commander Morrison. Your species fires metal slugs at enemy ships like some primitive civilization from the Stone Age." More laughter filled the hall. Jake felt Amy tense beside him, but he remained calm. This was not the first time aliens had mocked human military technology. "Energy weapons are the future," continued the Althurian admiral. Plasma cannons, laser arrays, quantum disruptors. These are weapons worthy of spacefaring civilizations. Your bullets are relics of a bygone era. A Thraxian representative clicked, his mandibles in agreement. The Zephyrian shields can deflect any energy weapon we possess. What hope do primitive projectiles have against such advanced defenses? Metal slugs cannot penetrate modern armor, added Ambassador Crix. Even if they could somehow bypass the energy shields, which is impossible, Zephyrian hull plating is made from quantum-reinforced materials. Your bullets would bounce off like pebbles. Jake listened to their criticism without changing expression. He had heard it all before. For 2 centuries, ever since humanity joined the Galactic Council, other species had looked down on human military technology. They saw projectile weapons as backward, primitive, useless. They had no idea how wrong they were. Perhaps, Admiral Kethver said with barely concealed arrogance, it would be best if human forces took on support roles in the coming battle. Supply runs, medical assistance, communications relay. Leave the actual fighting to species with more advanced capabilities. The suggestion hit Jake like a slap in the face. Support roles. They wanted to sideline humanity completely, treating them like some minor species that could not contribute to real warfare. Amy's hand clenched into a fist on the table. Jake could see the anger in her eyes. She knew, as he did, that human military technology was far more advanced than any alien species realized. They had spent centuries perfecting their weapons while other species focused on energy-based systems. We appreciate the offer, Jake said diplomatically, but human forces prefer to operate independently. We will take responsibility for our own sector of the battle. Very well, Kethver replied dismissively. But do not expect rescue when your primitive weapons fail against Zephyrian technology. The meeting continued for several more hours. Battle plans were discussed. Fleet positions were assigned. The human delegation was given the smallest, least important section of the defensive perimeter. A position that basically amounted to cleanup duty. As the session finally ended, Jake and Amy walked through the corridors of Nexus Prime toward their quarters. The station was a marvel of engineering, with corridors that curved in impossible directions and rooms that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. But Jake barely noticed the advanced architecture. His mind was focused on the coming battle. Sir, Amy said quietly, should we tell them the truth about our weapons? Jake shook his head. Let them think what they want to think. The Zephyrians have the same misconceptions about human technology. That ignorance might be our greatest advantage. They reached Jake's quarters, a simple room with basic furnishings, nothing like the elaborate chambers assigned to other species. But Jake preferred simplicity. It helped him think clearly. As Amy prepared to leave, Jake's communication device chimed. A priority message from Earth. He accepted the transmission, and the holographic image of General Paul Griffin appeared in the room. Commander Morrison, the general said, his weathered face serious. I've been monitoring the council proceedings. It seems our alien friends have decided to underestimate us once again. Yes, sir, Jake replied. They've assigned us to support roles. They don't think our weapons can penetrate Zephyrian defenses. General Griffin smiled grimly. Then they're in for quite a surprise. I'm authorizing deployment of the Kinetic Strike Fleet, all 12 ships, full ammunition load. Show them what human engineering can really accomplish. Jake felt a surge of anticipation. The Kinetic Strike Fleet was humanity's most closely guarded secret. Ships armed with weapons that the galaxy considered obsolete but that humanity had. Perfected beyond imagination. Understood, sir. We'll be ready. The transmission ended, leaving Jake alone with his thoughts. Tomorrow, the galaxy would learn a lesson about underestimating humanity. They thought bullets were obsolete. They were about to discover just how wrong they could be. 3 weeks had passed since the emergency meeting at Nexus Prime, the Kepler 442 system, home to peaceful farming colonies and research stations, had become the focal point of galactic attention. Long-range sensors had detected the approaching Zephyrian fleet. and every species in the galaxy held their breath. Captain Rick Turner stood on the bridge of the UNS Defiance, watching the tactical display with calm eyes. At 38 years old, Rick had commanded the ship for 6 years. His crew trusted him completely, and he had never let them down. The Defiance was one of 12 ships in humanity's kinetic strike fleet, vessels that looked nothing like the sleek, elegant warships of other species, where alien ships were smooth and curved. Human ships were angular and practical. The Defiance bristled with weapons that other species considered primitive. Railguns lined her hull like metal spines. Magnetic accelerators protruded from her sides like ancient cannons. To alien eyes, she looked like a relic from a bygone age. "Captain," called out Lieutenant Commander Steve Adams from the sensor station, "we're getting readings from the edge of the system. The Zephyrian fleet is about to drop out of hyperspace." Rick nodded. "All hands battle stations. Signal the fleet. It's time to see what we're up against." The bridge came alive with activity. Crew members moved to their positions with practiced efficiency. The Defiance had been preparing for this moment for months. Every system had been checked and rechecked. Every weapon had been tested and calibrated. In the distance, space itself seemed to tear open. Massive ships began emerging from hyperspace, their hulls gleaming with an otherworldly light. The Zephyrian fleet was enormous, dreadnoughts the size of small cities, cruisers that dwarfed most space stations, fighter carriers that could launch thousands of small attack craft. "My God," whispered Navigation Officer Linda Hayes, her voice filled with awe and fear. "There are so many of them." Rick counted the ships as they appeared: 50, 100, 150. The numbers kept climbing until over 200 Zephyrian vessels hung in space. Like a swarm of metallic insects, each ship was a masterpiece of alien engineering. Their hulls were made from materials that seemed to bend light around them. Energy shields flickered along their surfaces like aurora displays. Weapons ports glowed with barely contained power. These were not just warships. They were weapons of mass destruction. Leading the alien fleet was the largest ship Rick had ever seen. The Devastator, flagship of War Marshal Dexmore, stretched for over 3 kilometers from bow to stern. Its hull was covered in weapon emplacements, each one capable of destroying a city. Energy barriers surrounded it like a cocoon of pure power. "Signal from the Council Fleet," reported Communications Officer Bob Chun. "Admiral Kethver is ordering all ships to take position." Rick looked at the tactical display. The Council Fleet was impressive in its own way. 300 ships from dozens of species, all armed with the latest energy weapons. Althurian crystal ships that looked like flying diamonds. Thraxian bioships that seemed to be alive. Voltarian vessels that crackled with electrical energy. But Rick knew something the aliens didn't. Energy weapons had one critical weakness: they were predictable. Zephyrian shields had been designed over thousands of years to deflect energy-based attacks. Every plasma blast, every laser beam, every photon torpedo would be absorbed or reflected by those barriers. "Captain Turner," came Jake Morrison's voice over the communication system, "this is command. Take position with the rest of the human fleet. Remember, we wait for my signal." "Understood, Commander," Rick replied. "We'll be ready." The human fleet hung back from the main battle line. 12 ships against an armada of over 200. To outside observers, it looked like humanity was showing cowardice. Some alien crews were already making jokes about human bravery, but Rick knew better. The human ships weren't hiding. They were preparing. The battle began with a spectacular display of firepower. The Council fleet opened fire with everything they had. Streams of plasma energy crossed the void like rivers of light. Laser beams created a web of destruction across space. Photon torpedoes streaked toward their targets like falling stars. The Zephyrian shields absorbed it all. Every energy blast was turned aside or absorbed completely. The alien barriers flickered with each impact but never faltered. It was like watching someone throw water at a mountain. "Their shields are holding perfectly," reported Steve Adams, his voice filled with disbelief. "Every shot is being deflected or absorbed. The Zephyrians returned fire with devastating efficiency. Their weapons were unlike anything in the galaxy. Plasma cannons that could melt through any known armor. Disintegrator beams that broke apart matter at the molecular level. Energy missiles that could track their targets across vast distances. Within minutes, the first Council ship exploded. The Arthurian cruiser Crystal Dawn simply vanished in a ball of superheated plasma. More ships followed. The Thraxian bioship Living Spear broke apart as its organic hull was consumed by alien fire. The Voltarian destroyer Thunderstrike was cut in half by a disintegrator beam. "They're slaughtering them," whispered Linda Hayes. "The Council fleet doesn't stand a chance." Rick watched the battle with growing tension. The tactical display showed friendly ships winking out of existence one by one. The Zephyrians were not just winning. They were demonstrating complete superiority. Admiral Kethvera's flagship, the Diamond Sword, was taking heavy fire. Its crystal hull was cracking under the assault. The Arthurian admiral's voice came over the communication system, filled with desperation. "All ships, concentrate fire on the enemy flagship. We must break through their shields." The remaining Council ships focused their weapons on the Devastator. Hundreds of energy beams converged on the massive vessel. The light was so bright it was visible from planets on the edge of the system, but the Zephyrian flagship's shields held. The energy barriers flickered and danced but never broke. War Marshal Vexmore's voice echoed across all frequencies, filled with contempt. "Your weapons are useless against us. Your technology is primitive. Surrender now, and we will allow your species to serve the Empire." More Council ships died. The brave crews of dozens of species fought with everything they had, but their weapons simply could not penetrate Zephyrian defenses. Energy shield technology had advanced beyond their ability to counter it. "Captain," Steve Adams called out, "we're receiving multiple distress signals. The Council fleet is requesting immediate assistance." Rick looked at the tactical display. In less than an hour, the Council had lost over 60 ships. The Zephyrians had lost none. Not a single alien vessel showed any significant damage. "Signal from Commander Morrison," Bob Chun announced. "He's ordering us to maintain position and continue monitoring." Several alien commanders began questioning human courage over the open channels. Why weren't the human ships engaging? Were they afraid? Had they lost their nerve? But Rick knew the truth. The human fleet wasn't afraid. They were analyzing. Every shot fired, every shield impact, every energy signature was being recorded and studied. Colonel Lisa Hayes, commander of the UNS Retribution, had the most advanced targeting computers in the human fleet. She was running calculations that would have taken alien systems days to complete. "Captain," came Lisa's voice over the fleet communication system, "our analysis is complete. We've identified the shield frequency patterns. All ships prepare for Protocol 77 Alpha." Rick felt his pulse quicken. Protocol 77 Alpha was the signal they had been waiting for. The moment when humanity would show the galaxy what kinetic weapons could really do. "All hands prepare for combat," Rick announced to his crew. "Load tungsten penetrators in all railguns. Magnetic accelerators to full power. Today we show them why humans never abandon bullets." The crew moved with practiced efficiency. The Defiance's weapon systems came online with a deep thrumming sound. Magnetic fields built to incredible intensity. Projectiles made from the densest materials known to science were loaded into the firing chambers. "Signal from Commander Morrison," Bob Chun reported. "He's addressing the entire human fleet." Jake Morrison's voice filled the bridge, calm and confident. "All ships, this is Morrison. The galaxy is about to learn why we never abandoned kinetic weapons. They think bullets are obsolete. They're about to discover just how wrong they are. Execute Protocol 77 Alpha." Rick smiled grimly. "All weapons, target the enemy flagship. Show them what happens when bullets travel at light speed." The human fleet surged forward, their ships moving with surprising speed and agility. The Zephyrians barely acknowledged the approaching vessels. Why should they worry about 12 primitive ships when they had already proven their superiority against hundreds? War Marshal Dexmore actually laughed as he watched the human ships approach. "Look at them," he said to his officers. "They think their metal slugs can penetrate our shields. This will be amusing." But Rick Turner was not amused. He was focused, his crew was ready, their weapons were charged, and the galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the oldest weapons, when perfected, could defeat the most advanced technology. The battle was about to change forever. The 12 human ships moved through space like predators hunting prey. Captain Rick Turner watched his tactical display as the Un's Defiance closed in on the Zephyrian fleet. Around him, his crew worked with deadly precision. Every person on the bridge knew they were about to make history. "Range to target, 2,000 kilometers in closing," reported Lieutenant Commander Steve Adams. His voice was steady, but Rick could see the excitement in his eyes. They had trained for this moment for years. "Magnetic accelerators charged to full power," called out Weapons Officer Dan Miller. "Tungsten penetrators loaded and ready." "All railguns showing green status," Rick nodded. The Defiance carried weapons. That would have seemed impossible to earlier generations of humans. Railguns that could accelerate projectiles to incredible speeds using magnetic fields. Mass drivers that could launch telephone pole-sized rods of ultra-dense materials. Gauss cannons that fired swarms of smaller projectiles with pinpoint accuracy. But the real secret was not just the weapons themselves. It was the ammunition. The tungsten penetrators were not simple bullets. They were engineered marvels, made from materials denser than anything found in nature. Each one was perfectly shaped to maintain stability at relativistic speeds. When fired, they would travel at significant fractions of light speed. "Target acquired," Don Miller announced. "Zephyrian flagship, bearing 27 Mark IV. All weapons." Locked on, Rick looked at the massive alien ship on his display. The Devastator was over 3 kilometers long, its hull crackling with energy shields that had never been breached. War Marshal Dexmore commanded from that vessel, confident in his superiority. "Sir," came the voice of Navigation Officer Linda. "Hayes, we're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian flagship. They're demanding our surrender." Rick almost smiled. "Put them on speaker." The bridge filled with Dexmore's arrogant voice. "Human vessels, you are approaching our fleet with obvious hostile intent. Your primitive weapons cannot harm us. Surrender now, and we will grant you a quick death. Tell him we decline his generous offer," Rick said calmly. "All weapons, fire when ready." The Defiance shuddered as her railguns fired. The magnetic accelerators released their deadly cargo with a sound like thunder. Tungsten penetrators streaked through space. Invisible to the naked eye but devastating in their purpose, the projectiles hit the Zephyrian shields at 0.25 light speed. The energy barriers, designed to deflect plasma beams and laser fire, encountered something they had never faced before. Solid matter traveling at relativistic velocities. Physics took over. The shields could not deflect the penetrators because they were not energy. They were mass, moving at incredible speed. The kinetic energy was beyond calculation. When the tungsten rods hit the energy barriers, they punched through like bullets through paper. The Devastator's hull exploded in a cascade of destruction. The penetrators transferred their massive kinetic energy into the ship's structure, tearing through armor plating that was supposed to be impenetrable. Systems failed in chain reactions. Explosions rippled along the alien vessel's length. On the bridge of the Devastator, War Marshal Dexmore stared in shock at his damage reports. His ship, which had never been touched by enemy fire, was crippled. Atmosphere vented from dozens of hull breaches. Power systems failed across multiple decks. "Impossible," he snarled at his tactical officer. "Their weapons are primitive. How did they penetrate our shields?" His officer, a young Zephyrian named Kexvar, trembled as he read the sensor data. "Sir, the projectiles were moving at 0.25 light speed. The kinetic energy transfer is beyond our defensive calculations. Our shields were designed for energy weapons, not solid matter at relativistic velocities." Dexmore's face twisted with rage and disbelief. "Solid matter? You mean they actually hit us with bullets?" Yes, sir, but not ordinary bullets. These projectiles are made from ultra-dense materials and accelerated to speeds we thought impossible. Across the battlefield, the other human ships were demonstrating the same devastating effectiveness. The UN's Retribution, commanded by Colonel Lisa Hayes, unleashed her Gauss cannons against the Zephyrian carrier group. Depleted uranium rounds tore through the alien formation, like meteors through atmosphere. Each human ship carried different types of ammunition for different targets. Against the heavily armored Zephyrian dreadnoughts, they used osmium core penetrators that could punch through multiple layers of hull plating. Against fighter squadrons, they deployed proximity-fused cluster munitions that created deadly debris fields. Captain Ben Rogers, commanding the UN's Vengeance, targeted a group of Zephyrian destroyers. His magnetic accelerators fired a spread of tungsten rods that moved so fast they appeared as streaks of light. The alien ship simply disintegrated under the kinetic assault. Multiple hits on enemy vessels, reported Communications Officer Bob. Chun, the Zephyrian fleet is taking massive casualties. Rick watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. Alien ships that had seemed invincible were breaking apart under human fire. The same shields that had effortlessly deflected every energy weapon the Council could deploy were useless against kinetic projectiles. The physics were brutal and simple. Energy could be deflected, absorbed, or dissipated. But mass in motion followed the laws of momentum. When a solid object traveling at relativistic speeds hit a target, the results were catastrophic. "Sir," Steve Adams called out, "we're receiving signals from the Council fleet. They're asking what kind of weapons we're using." "Tell them we're using bullets," Rick replied. "Very fast bullets." The Zephyrian fleet tried to adapt to this new threat. Some ships attempted to maneuver away from the human vessels, but their massive size made them slow and clumsy. Others tried to overwhelm the human ships with sheer firepower, but the 12 human vessels were smaller and more agile than their alien opponents. War Marshal Vixmore ordered his remaining ships to focus all fire on the human fleet. "Destroy them," he commanded. "Show them the price of defying the Empire." Plasma beams and disintegrator rays converged on the human ships, but the humans had anticipated this response. Their vessels were built with layered armor systems designed to absorb kinetic impacts. The same engineering principles that made their weapons so effective also made their ships incredibly tough. The UNS Hammer, commanded by Captain Doug Mitchell, took a direct hit from a Zephyrian plasma cannon. The energy beam carved a trench along her hull, but the ship's compartmentalized design prevented catastrophic damage. Emergency systems activated automatically, sealing breaches and rerouting power. "Minor damage to outer hull," reported the Hammer's damage control officer. "All primary systems operational," Doug Mitchell smiled grimly. "Return fire. Show them what a mass driver can do." The Hammer's ultimate weapon was a magnetic mass driver that could fire projectiles the size of telephone poles. When it fired, the tungsten rod moved so fast it was invisible to sensors. The Zephyrian cruiser it targeted simply split in half. The massive kinetic energy cleaving through its entire length. Admiral Kethver, watching from his damaged flagship, could barely believe what he was seeing. The human ships, which he had dismissed as primitive, were systematically destroying the most advanced fleet in the galaxy. "How is this possible?" he asked his tactical officer. "They're using projectile weapons, bullets." "Sir," his officer replied, "our analysis shows that human kinetic weapons represent a completely different approach to warfare. While we focused on energy-based systems, they perfected the art of accelerating solid matter to incredible velocities." Kethaver's crystalline form flickered with newfound respect. "We assumed that newer technology was always better. We forgot that sometimes the old ways, when perfected, can defeat the most advanced systems." The battle continued to turn in favor of the human fleet. The UN's Thunderbolt, commanded by Lieutenant Commander Kate Sullivan, demonstrated the tactical flexibility of human warfare. Her ship switched between different ammunition types mid-battle, adapting to each target with deadly precision. Against Zephyrian battleships, she used armor-piercing penetrators that could bore through multiple layers of hull plating. Against their fighter swarms, she deployed fragmentation rounds that created expanding clouds of shrapnel. The aliens had never faced such adaptive tactics. "Sir," Don Miller reported, "enemy flagship is attempting to withdraw." "Should we pursue?" Rick looked at the tactical display. The Devastator was limping away from the battle, trailing atmosphere and debris. Exmora's mighty flagship was a broken wreck, its hull riddled with holes from human kinetic weapons. "Negative," Rick decided. "Let them go. I want them to tell the galaxy what happened here." The remaining Zephyrian ships were in full retreat. Of the 200 vessels that had entered the system, less than half remained operational. The human fleet had suffered only minor damage despite being outnumbered nearly 20 to 1. "Signal from Commander Morrison," Bob Chun announced. "He's ordering all ships to cease fire and begin rescue operations." Rick nodded. Even in victory, humans maintained their principles. They would save as many lives as possible, even among their enemies. As the battle ended, the galaxy watched in stunned silence. The supposedly primitive human fleet had accomplished what no other species thought possible. The Zephyrian fleet was in chaos. Ships that had never known defeat were burning in the void. Emergency signals filled the communication channels as alien crews struggled to understand what had happened to them. War Marshal Dexmore sat on the damaged bridge of his flagship, staring at reports that made no sense. "Sir," his tactical officer reported with a trembling voice, "we have lost 73 ships in the past hour. The human vessels continue to target our formations with impossible accuracy." Dexmore slammed his fist against his command chair. "Impossible accuracy? They are firing primitive projectiles. How can bullets be more effective than our advanced weapons?" But even as he spoke, another Zephyrian cruiser exploded on the tactical display. The UN's Retribution had fired a spread of osmium core penetrators that punched clean through the ship from bow to stern. The alien vessel simply came apart, its hull unable to withstand the massive kinetic energy transfer. Colonel Lisa Hayes watched from her command bridge as her weapons found their mark. At 42 years old, Lisa had commanded the Retribution for 8 years. She was known throughout the human fleet for her tactical brilliance and her ability to adapt to any situation. "Target destroyed," reported her weapons officer, Lieutenant Sam Parker. "Switching to secondary targets?" "Enemy destroyer formation, bearing 18 Mark 7, Lisa nodded. "Load fragmenting rounds. Let's show them what happens when they cluster their ships too close together." The Retribution's Gauss cannons fired a salvo of specialized ammunition. These rounds were designed to break apart just before impact, creating expanding clouds of high-velocity fragments. When they hit the Zephyrian destroyer formation, the results were devastating. The alien ships had been flying in tight formation, confident that their shields would protect them. But the fragmenting rounds created thousands of smaller projectiles, each one moving at incredible speed. The Zephyrian destroyers were caught in a deadly storm of metal fragments that tore through their hulls like paper. "Multiple targets destroyed," Sam Parker announced with satisfaction. Enemy formation scattered and retreating. Across the battlefield, Captain Ben Rogers was demonstrating another aspect of human tactical superiority. The UN's Vengeance had positioned itself between two groups of Zephyrian ships, using their own formations against them. "Fire through and through rounds," Ben ordered. "Let's see how many ships we can hit with one shot." The Vengeance is magnetic. Accelerators launched tungsten rods designed to maintain their velocity even after penetrating targets. The projectiles tore through the first Zephyrian ship, emerged from the other side, and continued into the vessel behind it. Some rounds penetrated 3 or 4 ships before finally coming to rest. The aliens had never encountered such tactics. Their entire military doctrine was based on energy weapons that lost power with distance and could only hit one target at a time. The idea of projectiles that could destroy multiple ships with a single shot was beyond their experience. "Sir," reported Communications Officer Bob Chun from the UNS Defiance, "we're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian flagship. War Marshal Dexmore is requesting to speak with our commanding officer." Captain Rick Turner looked at his tactical display. The battle was clearly turning in humanity's favor, but the aliens still had superior numbers. More than half of their fleet remained operational, though many ships showed damage from human kinetic weapons. Put him through, Rick decided. Let's hear what he has to say. Vexmore's image appeared on the main screen. The alien warlord looked shaken, his usual arrogance replaced by confusion and growing fear. Human commanders, I demand to know what sorcery you are using. Your weapons should not be able to penetrate our defenses, Rick almost smiled. No sorcery, Marshal. Just physics. Kinetic energy equals 1/2 mass times velocity squared. When you accelerate dense materials to relativistic speeds, the energy transfer becomes quite impressive. Impossible, Vexmore snarled. Your species uses primitive projectile weapons. Bullets cannot defeat advanced energy shields. You're right about one thing, Rick replied calmly. We do use projectile weapons. But there's nothing primitive about accelerating tungsten to 0.25 light speed. The transmission ended abruptly as Vexmore cut the connection. The alien commander was clearly struggling to understand how his supposedly superior technology had been so easily defeated, but the battle was far from over. Vexmore ordered his remaining ships to change tactics. If they couldn't defeat the human vessels at long range, they would overwhelm them at close quarters where superior numbers might make a difference. All ships close to knife-fighting range, Vexmore commanded. Surround the human vessels. Use our numbers to crush them. The Zephyrian fleet began to converge on the 12 human ships. It was a desperate gambit, but Vexmore was running out of options. His forces still outnumbered the humans by more than 10 to 1. Perhaps sheer mass could succeed where advanced technology had failed, but the aliens had made another critical error. At close range, human kinetic weapons became even more devastating. The shorter distance meant higher impact velocities and more accurate targeting. Captain Doug Mitchell, commanding the UNS Hammer, welcomed the approaching alien ships with grim anticipation. They want to get close, he said to his crew. Let's show them why that's a bad idea. The Hammer carried the most powerful kinetic weapon in the human fleet. Her magnetic mass driver could launch projectiles the size of small buildings. At close range, the massive tungsten rods were virtually unstoppable. Target the largest concentration of enemy ships, Doug ordered. Load heavy penetrators and fire at will. The mass driver fired with a sound like controlled thunder. The tungsten rod, weighing several tons and moving at incredible velocity, streaked through space toward a cluster of Zephyrian cruisers. When it hit, the results exceeded even human expectations. The rod punched through the first ship, emerged from the other side, and continued into the second vessel. The massive kinetic energy transfer caused both ships to explode in spectacular fashion. Debris from the destruction damaged several nearby vessels, creating a chain reaction of destruction. Holy ... whispered the Hammer's tactical officer. That one shot took out 6 ships, but the aliens kept coming. Zephyrian ships surrounded the human vessels, firing everything they had: plasma beams, disintegrator rays, and quantum torpedoes. Filled the space between the fleets with deadly energy. The human ships took damage, but their design philosophy served them well. While alien vessels were built for speed and firepower, human ships were built to survive. Redundant armor systems absorbed impact after impact. Compartmentalized hulls prevented single hits from causing catastrophic damage. Lieutenant Commander Kate Sullivan, commanding the UN's Thunderbolt, found herself surrounded by enemy vessels. Her ship was taking fire from 6 different directions, but she remained calm and focused. Switch to rapid fire mode, she ordered. Load proximity rounds and give them everything we've got. The Thunderbolt's weapons systems responded instantly. Gauss cannons fired streams of smaller projectiles that exploded near their targets, creating deadly fragment clouds. Railguns launched tungsten darts in rapid succession, each one capable of penetrating alien hull plating. The Zephyrian ships found themselves caught in a storm of high-velocity projectiles. Their shields, already weakened by previous impacts, began to fail completely. One by one, the alien vessels fell to human firepower. Enemy ships breaking off, reported Kate's tactical officer. They're trying to withdraw. But it was too late for an organized retreat. The Zephyrian formation had been shattered by human kinetic weapons. Ships fled in all directions, their crews more concerned with survival than military discipline. Jake Morrison, watching from the command center aboard Nexus Prime, coordinated the human fleet's response. His tactical genius was evident in how he positioned his ships to maximize their effectiveness while minimizing their exposure to enemy fire. "All ships pursue but maintain formation," he ordered. "Don't let them regroup." The human vessels moved with deadly efficiency. Each ship knew its role and executed it perfectly. The Inn's Defiance targeted fleeing cruisers. The Inn's Retribution hunted down destroyer squadrons. The Inn's Vengeance eliminated damaged vessels that might still pose a threat. Admiral Kethver, watching from his own damaged flagship, could barely comprehend what he was seeing. The supposedly primitive human fleet was systematically destroying the most advanced military force in the galaxy. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "the Zephyrian fleet has lost over 60% of its strength. They are in full retreat." Kethver's crystalline form pulsed with newfound respect for human capabilities. "Signal the human fleet," he ordered. "Tell them the Council forces are ready to support their operations." For the first time in the battle, alien ships moved to assist rather than lead. The remaining Council vessels, their energy weapons finally able to exploit the openings created by human kinetic strikes, joined the pursuit of the fleeing Zephyrians. The combination proved devastating. Human projectiles would breach alien shields and armor. Then Council energy weapons would pour through the gaps to finish off damaged targets. What had started as a rout was becoming a massacre. War Marshal Vexmore, his flagship limping toward the edge of the system, made a desperate decision. The space around Kepler 442 was filled with debris. Broken pieces of Zephyrian warships drifted in the void like metallic snow. Emergency beacons blinked desperately from escape pods and damaged vessels. The mighty fleet that had terrorized the galaxy for decades was now scattered wreckage. War Marshal Vexmore stood on the ruined bridge of his flagship. The Devastator, sparks flew from damaged control panels. The air tasted of smoke and fear. Through the cracked viewports he could see human ships moving among the wreckage like sharks among the wounded. "Sir," his communications officer reported with a shaking voice, "we have lost contact with over 160 ships. Only 37 vessels remain capable of hyperspace travel." Vexmore felt something he had never experienced before in his long military career: complete and total defeat. His supposedly invincible fleet had been destroyed by 12 human ships using weapons that everyone in the galaxy considered primitive. "How is this possible?" he whispered, more to himself than to his crew. "We had the most advanced technology. In the galaxy, our shields had never been breached. Our weapons could destroy planets." His tactical officer, young Kexvar, looked up from his damaged console. "Sir, our entire military doctrine was based on energy weapons. We never considered that solid projectiles could be accelerated to such incredible velocities." Vexmore stared at the tactical display showing the human ships. They looked so ordinary, so unremarkable. Nothing like the sleek, elegant vessels that dominated galactic warfare. Yet they had accomplished what no other force in the galaxy had managed to do. "Send a message to the human fleet," Vexmore ordered reluctantly. "Tell them the Zephyrian Empire requests terms for surrender." The words tasted like poison in his mouth, but he had no choice. His fleet was broken. His empire's reputation for invincibility was shattered. The galaxy would never fear the Zephyrians. Again, on the bridge of the UNS Defiance, Captain Rick Turner received the surrender request with quiet satisfaction. Around him, his crew worked to secure the battle zone and assist survivors. Even in victory, humans maintained their principles of mercy and honor. "Sir," Communications Officer Bob Chun reported, "we're receiving surrender terms from multiple Zephyrian vessels." "They're requesting safe passage out of the system," Rick nodded. "Grant their request. Signal all human ships to cease offensive operations and begin rescue duties." There are still lives to be saved out there. The transformation was remarkable. Ships that had been deadly enemies minutes before were now working together to save lives. Human vessels used their tractor beams to stabilize damaged alien ships. Medical teams prepared to treat wounded prisoners. It was a display of humanity's character that impressed even their former enemies. Jake Morrison watched the rescue operations from the command center aboard Nexus Prime. The battle was over, but the implications were just beginning. The defeat of the Zephyrian fleet would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. "Sir," Lieutenant Amy Peterson reported, "we're receiving communications from across the galaxy. Every major species wants to understand how we achieved this victory." Jake smiled grimly. For 2 centuries, other species had looked down on human military technology. They had considered projectile weapons to be primitive relics. Now they were desperate to learn the secrets of kinetic warfare. Admiral Kethver approached Jake with something resembling humility. The Althurian's crystalline form pulsed with newfound respect. "Commander Morrison, I owe you an apology. We underestimated your species completely." "No apology necessary, Admiral," Jake replied diplomatically. "Everyone makes assumptions based on their own experience. You couldn't have known that we had perfected kinetic weapons to such a degree." Kethver's form flickered with embarrassment. "We thought bullets were obsolete. How wrong we were." The victory had cost the human fleet surprisingly little. 12 ships remained operational, though several showed battle damage. The Un's hammer had taken the worst punishment during the ramming attempts, but her reinforced hull had held. The Un's Thunderbolt needed repairs to her outer armor. The Un's Retribution had minor system damage that could be fixed within days. Colonel Lisa Hayes, now elevated to Admiral for her tactical brilliance during the battle, established a communication link with Earth. General Paul Griffin's image appeared on the holographic display, his weathered face showing pride and satisfaction. "Congratulations, Admiral Hayes," the general said. "Your performance exceeded all expectations. The galaxy will never again question human military capabilities." Lisa nodded. "Thank you, sir. The crew performed magnificently. Our weapons proved their worth beyond any doubt." "Indeed they did," Griffin replied. "I'm authorizing the establishment of the Human Kinetic Warfare Academy on Luna. Every species in the galaxy will want to study our methods now." The political implications were enormous. The Zephyrian Empire, deprived of its primary fleet, sent peace negotiators within hours of the battle's end. Other aggressive species that had been planning expansion suddenly reconsidered their policies. The galaxy had learned that humanity possessed weapons capable of defeating any energy-based defense. Captain Ben Rogers, commanding the Un's Vengeance, found himself surrounded by alien observers as his ship docked with Nexus Prime engineers from dozens of species wanted to examine human kinetic weapons. They couldn't understand how projectile technology could be so effective. "The secret isn't in the weapons themselves," Ben explained to a group of fascinated alien scientists. "It's in the engineering. We spent centuries perfecting magnetic acceleration, developing ultra-dense materials and calculating optimal velocities." A Thraxian engineer clicked his mandibles in confusion. "But energy weapons should be superior. They travel at light speed and can be precisely controlled," Ben smiled. "Energy can be deflected or absorbed. Mass and motion follows the laws of physics. When a tungsten rod moving at 0.25 light speed hits a target, there's nowhere for that kinetic energy to go except into destruction." The educational process was just beginning. Species across the galaxy rushed to establish diplomatic relations with humanity. The same aliens who had dismissed human technology were now eager to learn from it. War Marshal Vexmore, aboard his damaged flagship as it limped toward the edge of the system, sent a final transmission to the human fleet. His voice carried a mixture of defeat and grudging respect. "Human commanders, you have accomplished something I thought impossible. You have defeated the greatest fleet in Zephyrian history using weapons we considered obsolete. How did your species achieve such mastery of kinetic warfare?" Captain Rick Turner, speaking for the human fleet, responded with characteristic honesty. Marshal, we never forgot that the simplest solutions are often the most effective. While other species pursued more and more complex energy weapons, we perfected the art of making objects move very, very fast. Nexmoor was silent for a long moment. Your victory will be remembered throughout the galaxy. The Zephyrian Empire has learned a hard lesson about the dangers of arrogance. The aftermath of the battle reshaped galactic politics completely. The Zephyrian Empire, deprived of its military might, agreed to peace treaties with all neighboring species. Their expansion had been stopped permanently. Other aggressive civilizations found themselves facing a new reality, where energy shields provided no protection against human weapons. The Human Kinetic Warfare Academy quickly became the most prestigious military institution in the galaxy. Officers from hundreds of species traveled to Luna to study human tactics and technology. They learned about magnetic acceleration, projectile design, and the physics of high-velocity impacts, but the real lesson was simpler than technology. Humanity had succeeded where others failed because they never abandoned something that worked. While other species chased after the newest and most exotic weapons, humans had perfected their kinetic systems to levels of effectiveness that seemed impossible. Admiral Lisa Hayes, now director of the Academy, often told her students about the battle at Kepler 442. The galaxy made a critical mistake, she would explain. They assumed that newer technology was always better. They forgot that sometimes the oldest weapons, when perfected, can defeat the most advanced defenses. Years later, as peace settlements were signed and new alliances formed, the galaxy remembered the day when everything changed. Species that had never cooperated before found common ground in their shared respect for human military innovation. The Zephyrian threat was ended forever. Their empire became a peaceful member of the galactic community, their aggressive expansion replaced by scientific research and cultural exchange. But they never forgot the lesson they learned from humanity. Jake Morrison, promoted to admiral and appointed as humanity's chief military representative, stood before the Galactic Council on the first anniversary of the battle. Representatives from every known species listened as he addressed the assembly. 1 year ago, you thought bullets were obsolete, he said simply. Today, every species in the galaxy is developing kinetic weapons. You've learned that sometimes the most effective solution is also the simplest one. The audience, filled with beings who had once mocked human technology, listened in respectful silence. They had all learned the same lesson the hard way.